This marriage was just for show, the cowboy said, until his heart betrayed him. The twin suns of Erythra Prime burned low over the horizon, casting long shadows across the jagged rock mesas that stretched across the frontier planet. Dust swirled in the hot wind, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of distant mining operations, and the scent of dry, hardy vegetation that somehow survived the harsh climate. On this planet, life was raw, unforgiving, and beautiful in its own rugged way, just like the people who called it home. Jax Teller sat astride his hoverbike, watching the small settlement ahead. Dust clung to his worn leather coat, and the brim of his wide hat shaded eyes that had seen too much but had learned to miss nothing. He had always preferred the quiet of open plains to the crowded chambers of politics, and yet here he was, riding into the center of it. His jaw clenched as he thought about why. A marriage he had no desire for, a union meant to protect humanity's fragile hold in this dangerous sector of space. It's just for show, he muttered to himself. Nothing more. Behind him, the sleek shuttle of the alien coalition's representative landed gracefully, kicking up clouds of red dust. Its polished hull reflected the dying suns like a mirror, and the symbols etched along its sides glowed faintly, a silent warning of advanced technology that humans could barely understand. Out stepped Kira, her posture perfect, her expression calm, though her eyes flicked around the settlement, absorbing everything. Kira was nothing like the humans she now had to live among, or at least pretend to. Her people valued logic over emotion, precision over passion, and negotiation over action. Yet something in the way she moved suggested curiosity, a spark that human instinct might even call courage. Jax dismounted his hoverbike, boots crunching against the rocky ground. He didn't bow, didn't offer a greeting more than a nod. Kira's gaze met his, and for a moment, an unspoken understanding passed between them. They were both trapped in a game they had not chosen, yet survival demanded they play along. The settlement's mayor, a short, wiry man named Eldrick, waited near the entrance of the communal hall. His eyes shifted nervously between Jax and Kira. "The ceremony will begin soon," he said, voice tight. "The delegates from the coalition will be here any minute." Jax's hand hovered over the handle of his sidearm, not that he planned to use it, but the instinct was too ingrained to ignore. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said simply. Kira's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Neither am I, but trouble has a way of finding us anyway." Inside the hall, banners hung with symbols that neither human nor alien could read without careful study. The air was tense, thick with anticipation. Humans and aliens mingled cautiously, exchanging nods, polite smiles, and careful words. Jax felt a familiar discomfort. The delicate dance of diplomacy was foreign to him. Out here on the frontier, problems had clear solutions. You fixed what you could and you survived. Politics, he thought, was like sand slipping through your fingers, impossible to hold and just as likely to choke you if you tried. The alien delegates arrived, their movements smooth, almost liquid, each step precise. Their eyes, slightly larger than humans, flicked around constantly, analyzing, predicting. When they stopped in front of Jax, he felt a twinge of defiance. They were trying to measure him, and he refused to be measured. "You are Jax Teller?" the tallest one asked. Its voice was melodic but carried a subtle edge that humans would call authority. "I am," Jax replied, tipping his hat. "And you are?" The alien's lips didn't move as one would expect, yet a clear, resonant voice echoed in Jax's mind. "We are representatives of the coalition. Your people need our protection and we require your cooperation." Jax grunted. "I cooperate when it makes sense. Otherwise," he let the sentence hang. They understood anyway. The ceremony began with a formal speech that Jax struggled to follow. Kira's hand brushed his briefly during the exchange of pledges, a fleeting contact that sent a strange heat through his chest. He had been married once before, long ago, to a woman he'd loved, and lost to circumstances that left him wary of trust. Yet for some reason, the touch did not unsettle him. Instead, it made him alert. As the officiant concluded the ceremony, pronouncing them a union of necessity and strategic value, Jax looked around. The crowd clapped politely, but he could sense the undercurrents, the murmurs of doubt, the carefully concealed curiosity about what humans were really like. No one expected them to last, he thought, and perhaps they wouldn't. But that didn't matter. What mattered was surviving the immediate threats, navigating the unknown dangers of the frontier, and maybe, just maybe, learning something from each other. After the ceremony, they were escorted to a modest dwelling assigned to them, part of the alien coalition's efforts to accommodate human customs while maintaining control. It was sparsely decorated, but functional, with views overlooking the jagged mesas where wild creatures hunted in packs at dawn. Jax leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching Kira inspect the room with careful precision. "This will do," she said finally, eyes scanning the simple furnishings. "It's human, isn't it?" "Yeah," Jax replied. "Not much, but it works." He hesitated. "Look, Kira, I'm not a politician. I'm not here to charm anyone or follow rules I don't understand. I deal in facts, in what I can see and touch. That's all I can promise." Kira nodded slowly, as if she understood entirely. "And that is more than most of my people would give." The conversation was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Red lights flashed across the room and a mechanical voice echoed, "Warning! Unauthorized vessel approaching. Unknown identification." Jax's eyes narrowed. "Figures. You can't have a peaceful day without something trying to ruin it." Kira moved quickly to the communication console, her fingers flying over controls that Jax barely recognized. "They're coming fast. Whoever they are, they don't want us here." Jax mounted his hoverbike again, already scanning the horizon for movement. The wind carried a faint whirring sound that grew louder, mechanical, menacing. Figures appeared on the ridge, armed, cloaked, their intentions clear. "Looks like trouble found us," Jax muttered, a half-smile breaking his stoic expression. Kira didn't hesitate. "Then we handle it together." For the first time since the ceremony began, Jax felt the stirrings of something he hadn't expected. It wasn't fear. It wasn't duty. It was the recognition that this alien diplomat, his political bride, could be trusted. Not fully, not yet, but enough to face whatever came next. The attackers charged, their hovercraft skimming the rocky ground like predatory birds. Jax's hand rested on his sidearm, but instinct, not technology, guided him. He maneuvered his bike with precise skill, dodging blasts and returning fire with calculated bursts. Kira coordinated the defenses using the console, her voice calm and commanding, directing humans and allies with a logic that surprised him. They fought side by side, two worlds converging in the chaos. Jax realized something essential. Humans had a kind of courage that was unpredictable, flexible, and relentless. It wasn't about technology or status. It was about instinct, heart, and the will to survive. In that moment, the marriage of convenience felt real in a way neither of them could have planned. The attackers retreated as quickly as they came, leaving scorched earth and tension in their wake. Jax and Kira looked at each other, breathing heavily, hearts pounding, not from fear, but from the thrill of having faced danger and survived. "We'll need to be careful," Kira said, still focused, scanning the horizon. "This isn't over." Jax nodded, a grin tugging at his lips. "No, it is, but for what it's worth, I'm glad you're with me on this." Kira's lips curved in a faint smile, and for a fleeting moment the harsh frontier didn't seem so lonely. Two strangers bound by politics caught in a wild galaxy, beginning to discover the strange, unspoken power of human courage, and perhaps the unexpected beginnings of something more. The twin suns set fully, casting the mesas into deep shadow. The frontier awaited, dangerous and unpredictable, but for Jax and Kira the first battle was won. and in the quiet after the storm, a fragile trust began to form. The next morning, the twin suns rose again, painting the mesas in hues of gold and crimson. The air was cooler now, carrying the faint scent of ionized metal from distant mining stations. Jack's teller sat on the edge of a cliff, boots dangling over the sharp rocks, his eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Kira leaned against a boulder, arms folded, her posture as perfect as ever, though her expression betrayed quiet curiosity. "You didn't sleep much," Kira said, tilting her head slightly. Jack shrugged. "Out here, sleep comes easy if you're not thinking about politics or aliens trying to kill you." Kira's lips curved in the faintest of smiles. "Yet last night you saved me, reckless but effective." He looked away, fixing his gaze on the distant mesas. "I do what works." "Reckless? Maybe. But we're alive, aren't we?" They had been assigned to travel together across the frontier settlement and its surrounding territories. The political marriage required them to appear united in public, yet every step felt unnatural to Jax. He was used to relying on instinct, to acting alone when necessary. Kira, on the other hand, relied on logic, strategy, and careful observation. Together they were an odd pairing, one that others found amusing or suspicious. Their first stop was the trading hub of Hallow Point, a dusty town built from scavenged metals, solar panels, and reinforced domes. Humans and aliens mingled here freely, but tension was always present. It was the kind of place where a wrong word could start a fight, or worse, a war. As they entered the hub, traders paused to watch them. Jax noticed the whispers immediately, the tall human cowboy and the composed alien diplomat side by side. He wasn't sure whether they envied the attention or feared the potential consequences of the union. A middle-aged human vendor approached, bowing slightly. "Jack's teller, Lady Kira, the council sent word that you're visiting Hallow Point." "That's right," Jax said, tipping his hat. "Just passing through, looking at trade routes." The vendor glanced at Kira, then back at Jax. "Not often you see a cowboy and a coalition diplomat together. Makes people nervous or hopeful." Kira's gaze swept the market. "Observation is always better than assumption. Keep your eyes open. You never know who is watching and why," Jax grunted. "That's one thing I've learned already." They moved through the bustling market, aliens and humans trading goods, technology, and information. Kira stopped at a stall displaying energy canisters, scanning the items with interest. "Your people are resourceful," she said quietly. "You make do with what you have, always finding ways to improve or adapt. That is admirable." Jax shrugged, brushing dust off his coat. "Survival teaches you things. You improvise or you die. Simple as that." Kira studied him carefully, noting the ease with which he navigated this chaotic environment. Humans, she thought, had a kind of instinct that no training or technology could replicate. Even her people, with their precision and planning, could not anticipate the unpredictable. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the edge of the market. A group of masked raiders, small but heavily armed, had cornered a caravan of traders. Their blasters glowed ominously and the traders froze, unsure how to react. Jax didn't hesitate. "Stay close," he muttered, already moving toward the attackers. Kira followed, her hands on her console bag, ready to coordinate defenses. "Hands off our goods," Jax shouted, drawing the attention of the raiders. They turned, sneering behind their masks, thinking a single human cowboy would be easy prey. But Jax moved with the skill of someone who had spent years surviving on the frontier. He dodged blaster fire, using the stalls for cover, and returned controlled shots that disabled the raiders' weapons. Kira, working quickly, activated the hub's defensive drones. They swooped down, creating barriers and disabling the raiders' hoverpacks. Humans and aliens alike stopped to watch the spectacle. It was not brute force alone that won the day. It was timing, improvisation, and courage. By the time the raiders realized they were outmatched, they fled into the desert, leaving the caravan intact. Breathing heavily, Jax turned to Kira. Not bad for a diplomat. Kira's lips curved in a faint smile. And not bad for a cowboy. Your instincts, they make a difference. The traders, grateful, bowed and offered gifts of food and water, but Jax waved them off. We're not here for thanks. We're here to make sure you survive. As the market returned to normal, Jax and Kira walked together, side by side. For the first time, Jax noticed how strange it felt to have someone watching his back, someone who could anticipate moves he hadn't even considered. And for Kira, she began to appreciate the human quality she had undervalued: unpredictability, courage, and heart. Their journey continued to the edge of the mesa, where the local council awaited a report on the recent surge in raider activity. Kira and Jax were to provide insight on how best to protect settlements. Inside the council chamber, alien delegates whispered among themselves, and human leaders looked tense. Reports indicate raiders are using new technology, one council member said, frowning. How did they survive the patrols? Jax leaned forward. Because humans and anyone else trying to live out here don't always follow predictable patterns. You plan, they improvise, that's how they stay one step ahead. An alien delegate hissed softly. That is inefficient. Chaos is dangerous. Jax smirked. Chaos is human. And sometimes it works. Kira placed a hand on the council table, her voice calm and measured. He is correct. Understanding human instinct is critical. We underestimate it at our peril. There was silence, then nods of cautious agreement. The human frontier had proven itself once again, not through superior technology, but through adaptability, courage, and determination. As they stepped outside, Jax noticed a faint glow on the horizon. A distant ship, small but fast, moved with precision that suggested it was not a simple raider vessel. Kira noticed it too, her brow furrowing. They're scouting, she said. Someone wants to know where we are. Jax grunted. Then we make sure they don't get what they came for. He mounted his hoverbike, motioning for Kira to follow. Time to show them what humans can do. The chase led them across rocky canyons and dry riverbeds, the ship darting between mesas with speed that seemed impossible. Jax relied on instinct, weaving through narrow passes, predicting the enemy's path before their sensors could register. Kira coordinated remotely, hacking the local comms and drones to create interference that forced the ship to slow. Finally, the vessel stopped near a small cliff, scanning the area. Jax and Kira approached cautiously. We need to find out who they are and why they're here, Kira said. Jax nodded. And we do it our way. As they crept closer, a shadow moved near the edge of the cliff. It was humanoid but not human. The figure paused, then vanished into the rocks. They're watching, Kira said quietly. Careful, Jax. Whoever they are, they know more than we thought. He grinned, adrenaline rushing. Good, that makes it interesting. They spent the next hour tracking signs of the scout party, discovering subtle traces of energy manipulation. Tech 2 advanced for ordinary raiders. Jax's mind raced. This isn't just raiders, he muttered. Someone bigger is out here. Kira's eyes narrowed. And they're testing us, observing human and coalition responses, which means we are being studied. The revelation was unsettling, but neither showed fear. They had survived worse. And for the first time, Jax realized something important. Working together, humans and aliens could survive even the unknown. The sun set behind the mesas, casting long shadows over the desert. The settlement below twinkled with lights as traders and residents settled in for the night. Jax and Kira stood together on the cliff, looking out over the land they were sworn to protect. You know, Jax said, breaking the silence, this marriage thing, it might not be as useless as I thought. Kira glanced at him, eyes reflecting the twin sun's last light. Perhaps, but be careful, Jax. Trust is fragile, especially when the galaxy itself seems intent on testing it. He nodded. I know, but if anyone can handle it, it's humans and me. Kira smiled faintly, a mixture of amusement and respect. We'll see about that. The night came alive with distant howls of alien creatures and the hum of machinery. Somewhere out there, the enemy waited, unaware that two unlikely allies, human and alien, had begun to form a bond stronger than politics, stronger than strategy. A bond that might just change the balance of the frontier. The stars sparkled overhead, endless and unyielding. And for Jax and Kira, the adventure was only beginning. The morning sun spilled across the jagged rocks of Erythra Prime, painting them in shades of orange and rose. Jax Teller sat on the edge of the settlement's observation deck, staring at the horizon. His hands, calloused from years of frontier life, rested on the railing, yet his mind was far from the simple routines of survival. Kira joined him silently, her steps light, almost floating over the metal grating. She leaned against the railing beside him, her eyes scanning the distant mesas. "You think too much," she said softly. Jax snorted. "I think just enough to survive. You worry about strategy, alliances, technology. I worry about what comes next." Kira's gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. She had observed him closely over the past few days, noting how human instinct guided his every movement. Where aliens relied on calculations, Jax relied on intuition, a sense that somehow always seemed to place him one step ahead. It fascinated her, unsettled her, and she realized drew her closer to him than she had ever expected. "We're running out of time," she said, changing the subject. "The scouts we saw yesterday, they weren't ordinary raiders. They're testing us, observing patterns, and we're not just targets, we're variables." Jax followed her gaze. "Variables, huh? I've never liked being part of an experiment." She gave him a faint smile. "Perhaps no one does, but we can use it, learn from it." They mounted their hoverbikes and rode toward the mesa cliffs, where reports suggested the scouts had retreated after their failed surveillance. The wind whipped across Jax's face, carrying the scent of metal and dry dust. Kira rode beside him, her long coat flapping behind her, eyes fixed on the landscape with unwavering focus. As they approached a narrow canyon, movement caught Jax's attention. He slowed, signaling Kira. "Something's not right, stay sharp." They rounded a bend and saw the scene, a human trader pinned to the ground, surrounded by masked figures wielding energy weapons. His hoverbike lay toppled beside him. Jax didn't hesitate. "Get down," he shouted, dismounting and drawing his sidearm. Kira leapt off her bike, hands flying over a portable control pad, activating defensive drones hidden nearby. The attackers froze for a fraction of a second, then lunged. Jax moved with precision, dodging energy blasts and disabling their weapons. Kira's drones swooped down, creating a barrier that separated the attackers, giving the traitor a chance to escape. Once the skirmish ended, Jax's heart pounded, not from fear but from the rush of action, the instinctive clarity that came from surviving. The traitor, wide-eyed and grateful, stammered, I don't know how to thank you." Jax waved him off. "Stay alive, that's thanks enough." Kira, standing beside him, watched silently, noting how effortlessly he moved in chaos. "Your people, you thrive where others panic," Jax shrugged. "We adapt or we die, it's that simple." As they mounted their bikes again, Kira hesitated. "Jax, yesterday you saved me. You risked yourself." He glanced at her, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "I told you we're alive, that's what matters," she nodded slowly. "Yes, but it was more than that. You didn't hesitate, you acted instinctively. I've seen human courage before, but yours, it's different, it's personal." For a moment, Jax felt a strange warmth in his chest, a flutter of feeling he had long ignored. He looked away, focusing on the canyon ahead. "Don't read too much into it. I do what needs doing." But Kira saw it. Even humans tried to hide their hearts, but she had begun to understand that instinct, action, and emotion were intertwined. And in Jax Teller, the frontier cowboy, there was a heart that was beginning to betray his own words. They continued to track the scouts, moving through narrow passes and rocky cliffs. Kiera's analytical mind detected patterns in the attacker's movements, while Jax's intuition guided them safely around traps and ambush points. For the first time, they worked seamlessly, not as strangers bound by a contract but as partners in survival. The trail led them to an abandoned outpost, half buried in sand and debris. Its metal walls were scorched, evidence of recent conflict. Jax dismounted cautiously, scanning the perimeter. "They were here recently," he muttered. Kiera approached a damaged console, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. "Someone wants us to see this," she said, eyes narrowing. A holographic map flickered to life, displaying coordinates and movements of various human settlements and alien patrols. "They're planning something bigger." Jax's jaw tightened. "Looks like our little frontier is about to get a lot more dangerous." Before they could react further, a sudden explosion rocked the outpost. Dust and debris filled the air as masked attackers emerged from hidden tunnels, weapons blazing. Jax ducked behind a wall, firing back with precision. Kiera activated drones to intercept, creating a chaotic but controlled defense. During the firefight, one of the attackers lunged toward Kiera, blade extended. Without thinking, Jax threw himself in front of her, taking a glancing blow to the shoulder. Pain shot through him, but he stayed on his feet, returning fire and pushing the attacker back. Kiera's eyes widened. "Jax!" she shouted, rushing to his side after the attackers retreated. He waved her off, gritting his teeth against the pain. "I'm fine, just a scratch." She knelt beside him, inspecting the wound. "This isn't just a scratch, you could've." "I know what I'm doing," he interrupted gently, but his voice softened. "Don't worry about me." Yet as she tended to him, Kiera realized something important. Humans were not only brave, but their loyalty ran deep. They risked themselves for others without hesitation. And in that moment, she saw the truth. Jax Teller was more than a partner in this forced marriage. He was someone whose heart had already begun to betray the rules he had set for himself. They rested briefly, hidden among the ruins, and Kiera studied him carefully. "You don't often let people get close," she said quietly. Jax looked away, staring at the distant horizon. "Doesn't make sense out here. Trust is expensive." "Perhaps," she said softly, "but sometimes it's worth the cost." The wind carried the distant hum of engines, fast, precise, and controlled. Kiera's eyes narrowed. "They're returning, and they're not alone." Jax pushed himself to his feet, ignoring the pain in his shoulder. "Then we prepare, together." As they moved through the ruins, Kiera noticed how Jax's instincts guided every decision. He didn't wait for orders, didn't calculate endlessly. He reacted, adapted, and survived. And yet, despite the danger, she felt an unexpected reassurance. With him, even the unknown threats of the frontier seemed manageable. Hours later, they emerged from the canyon onto a high plateau, overlooking the settlement below. Smoke rose from a small outpost in the distance, evidence that their enemies were escalating. Jax's eyes narrowed. "They're testing us, seeing how far they can push." Kiera studied him, her expression thoughtful. "And yet you didn't hesitate to protect me yesterday, or today. That is human, isn't it?" Jax gave a small, wry smile. "Maybe, or maybe it's just me, doesn't matter, we survive. That's what counts." For the first time, Kiera felt a flicker of respect, no admiration for the stubborn, impulsive human beside her. She had entered this union expecting a partner of convenience. Instead, she found someone whose courage, instincts, and heart challenged her assumptions. And for the first time, she wondered whether the rules of duty could withstand the unexpected bond forming between them. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting the plateau in shadow. Lights from the settlement twinkled below, and the wind carried the faint hum of distant engines, reminders that the frontier was far from safe. But for Jax and Kiera, the battle had changed something fundamental. They had faced danger, survived, and discovered a trust that went beyond politics. And in the quiet aftermath, a fragile connection began to take root, one that might turn the contract of necessity into something neither of them had expected. Kira glanced at Jax, who was scanning the horizon as always. "You didn't have to risk yourself for me," she said softly. He shrugged, looking back at her with a hint of a grin. "Maybe not, but I wouldn't have survived without you either. Guess we're even." She allowed herself a small smile. "Perhaps, but next time try not to get shot." Jax chuckled, wincing slightly at the pain in his shoulder. "No promises." As darkness fell across the mesas, they set up a temporary camp, their hoverbikes close and weapons ready. The stars above sparkled with the same indifferent brilliance as always, endless and unyielding. Out there, danger waited. Unknown enemies lurked. And yet, side by side, Jax Teller and Kira had discovered a truth about humans. Courage, loyalty, and heart could shine brighter than any weapon, and sometimes it was enough to change the course of events. In that quiet, starlit night, Kira realized something even more unsettling. She was beginning to care. Not because she had to, not because the Union demanded it, but because humans, messy, stubborn, unpredictable humans, had a way of breaking the rules of the heart. And Jax Teller had already begun to do just that. The frontier was dangerous, the enemies unknown, and the stakes higher than ever. But in the chaos of survival, two unlikely allies had begun to find something far more precious than strategy or politics: trust, respect, and the first flickers of something that might one day be called love. The sun had barely begun its climb over the mesas of Prime when Jax Teller and Kira awoke to an unsettling silence. The usual hum of distant machinery and the faint calls of desert creatures were absent. The wind carried no familiar scent of metal or dust. Instead, a heavy, tense calm settled over the settlement like a warning. Jax tightened the straps on his leather gloves and checked his sidearm. "Something's off," he muttered. Kira, standing beside him, nodded without speaking. They didn't have to wait long. A local scout arrived, riding a low hover bike with pale blue lights flashing urgently. "They've taken her," he said, voice trembling. "Lady Kira, the alien, someone attacked last night. She's been kidnapped." Jax's heart clenched. The words didn't feel real at first. He had faced raiders, mercenaries, even alien scouts before, but never like this. Never Kira. "Where?" he asked, already moving toward his hoverbike. "The canyon to the east," the scout said. "They left a trail, but they're fast." Kira's eyes narrowed, calm returning despite the urgency. "We have to go now," she said. "If we hesitate, they'll disappear into the desert and we'll lose her." Jax mounted his hoverbike, adrenaline surging. "No one touches her and gets away," he muttered. "Not on my watch." The journey to the eastern canyon was treacherous. Narrow passes, jagged cliffs, and sudden drops made pursuit difficult. Jax relied on instinct, weaving through the terrain with unmatched precision. Kira, beside him, coordinated with local scouts using her portable console. Drones and sensors monitored the area ahead, relaying movements of the captors. Hours passed, but finally they spotted a column of dust in the distance, an enemy convoy moving swiftly across the desert. Kira activated her drones to fly ahead, scanning the convoy and mapping every detail. "They're heavily armed," she said, voice tight with concern. "And they've fortified the vehicle carrying the hostages. We'll need a plan." Jax dismounted, crouching behind a boulder. "Then we improvise, as usual." Kira looked at him, a faint smile playing on her lips. "That is why humans are remarkable." Jax grinned, checking his sidearm and a few improvised explosives he had packed. "Remarkable or stubborn, same thing out here." The canyon narrowed, forcing the convoy to slow. Jax studied the terrain, eyes scanning for anything he could use: loose rocks, narrow cliffs, natural choke points. "We hit them here," he said, pointing to a constricted pass. "They won't see us coming." Kira adjusted her drones, projecting a real-time map onto her portable console. "I can disable some of their vehicles remotely, but the rest will rely on your unorthodox methods." Jax smirked. Unorthodox works, trust me. The ambush began. Rocks tumbled down from the cliffs above, creating dust and confusion among the convoy. Jax fired precise shots, disabling energy weapons and forcing the guards to scatter. Kira's drones swooped in, hacking the convoy's navigation systems and immobilizing some vehicles entirely. Amid the chaos, one of the heavily armored vehicles carrying Kira was blocked by a toppled boulder. Jax ran forward, dodging energy blasts and leaping across debris. Using a combination of explosives and brute strength, he forced the vehicle open, exposing the interior. Inside, Kira was unharmed but restrained. Her eyes met Jax's, and for a moment no words were needed. They had both risked everything, and yet the bond formed in previous days, the trust, the understanding made them unstoppable. "Go," she said quietly, her voice steady. Jax cut the restraints with a quick swipe of his blade, then pulled her into a crouched position as they ducked behind a fallen vehicle. The convoy guards regrouped, but Jax had already set another trap, explosives strategically placed along the canyon's edge, ready to collapse part of the cliff and block the pursuers. The plan worked. The canyon shook violently as the rocks tumbled, blocking the enemy vehicles and forcing them to retreat. Jax and Kira didn't wait. They mounted their bikes and sped through the narrow pass, leaving dust and chaos behind. Once they were at a safe distance, Kira finally allowed herself to breathe. You didn't have to risk yourself like that." Jax shook his head, trying to appear casual, though the adrenaline still pulsed through his veins. "I did. That's what humans do. You protect the people you care about. End of story." Kira studied him carefully, her analytical mind trying to reconcile the stubborn human beside her with the raw courage she had witnessed. "It's remarkable and dangerous." "Yeah, well, danger is kind of my specialty," Jax replied with a grin. They rode in silence for a while, the desert stretching endlessly around them. Kira's mind, usually so precise and logical, wandered into unfamiliar territory. She had entered this marriage as a formality, a duty. And yet Jax's actions, his instinct, his courage, his refusal to hesitate, had broken through the barriers she had placed around herself. "You saved me," she said quietly, breaking the silence. Jax glanced at her, eyes serious. "Yeah, and I'd do it again, every time. Don't make me regret it, all right?" She gave a faint smile. "I don't think you will." As night fell, they found a temporary camp atop a mesa, high above the desert floor. Fires crackled, drones circled for surveillance, and the wind carried the faint hum of distant engines. For the first time, they allowed themselves a moment of rest. Jax cleaned and reloaded his weapons, his thoughts drifting. He realized that Kira's presence had changed something in him. The bond formed during their shared danger was no longer purely practical. It had touched something deeper, something he hadn't acknowledged in years. Kira, watching him, felt the same stirrings. She had come to the frontier expecting duty, politics, and calculation. Instead, she found bravery, loyalty, and a human heart that refused to follow the rules. And in that refusal, she began to see the possibilities, not just for survival, but for connection. The peaceful moment shattered when a scout returned, panting and wide-eyed. "They've regrouped," he said, "and they're planning another attack, this time bigger, more coordinated. They know we rescued her." Jax's jaw tightened. "Figures, nothing in this galaxy comes easy." Kira studied the map he projected with her console. "They're targeting the human settlements now. If we don't act, many lives will be lost." Jax's expression hardened. "Then we stop them, all of them." They devised a plan using a combination of human intuition and Kira's analytical mind. Jax would lead a direct attack on the enemy's supply lines, forcing them to split their forces, while Kira would hack communications and disable key vehicles. They were a team now, not a political partnership, but a living, breathing unit built on trust and shared danger. The following day, they executed their plan. Jax led the charge, using improvised explosives, careful timing, and unmatched knowledge of the terrain to take out supply caches and create confusion among the enemy forces. Kira's drones disabled vehicles remotely, cut off communication, and guided civilians to safety. The operation was a success. The enemy retreated, scattered and defeated, unable to anticipate the unpredictable human tactics. Jax and Kira had not only saved the settlements but demonstrated the very essence of human ingenuity, adaptability, courage, and a willingness to risk everything to protect others. As they stood atop the mesa, watching the retreating forces, Jax looked at Kira. "We make a pretty good team, don't we?" she smiled, a mix of respect and something softer. "Yes, humans and their unpredictable hearts. I think I understand now," Jax grinned. "Good, just remember my heart isn't always that easy to read." Kira chuckled softly. "Perhaps. But I think I'm learning." The desert stretched before them, endless and dangerous. Yet in that moment they knew something fundamental had changed. The forced marriage, the political alliance, it was no longer just convenience. It had become a bond forged in danger, trust, and the raw human courage that refused to yield. And as the stars blinked awake in the night sky, Jax and Kira realized that the frontier was not just a place of survival, it was a proving ground. Here humans could shine, hearts could betray expectation, and alliances could turn into something more powerful than either logic or duty. The galaxy was vast, the dangers unending, and the stakes higher than ever. But together, they were unstoppable. And whatever the enemy planned next, they would face it, not as political pawns, but as two beings who had discovered the true meaning of courage, trust, and loyalty. The twin suns rose over Erythra Prime, their light stretching across jagged mesas and casting long shadows over the settlement below. Jax Teller stood at the edge of the observation deck, surveying the horizon. The air smelled of warm dust and the faint metallic tang of the settlement's machinery. Beside him, Kira adjusted the controls on a small drone hovering nearby. Her face was calm, composed, but the faint lines of worry lingered around her eyes. "The Coalition has requested a report," she said. Jax grunted. "Figures, they always want updates." They never seem to notice the obvious. Humans survive by doing what needs doing, not by writing reports. Kira smiled faintly. Yet reports can be important. They show coordination, planning, and intelligence. He shook his head, grinning. "Nothing beats instinct. And sometimes courage. You saw that firsthand." Kira's eyes softened. "Yes, and yet courage without control can be reckless." Jax leaned against the railing, boots resting on the metal. "Maybe, but we survived, didn't we?" Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the weight of the past weeks, the battles, the ambushes, the desert nights, hung between them. They had faced danger, witnessed human courage in its rawest form, and relied on each other in ways neither expected. The forced marriage, initially a political contract, had become something else entirely, a partnership forged in fire, trust, and mutual respect. The hum of engines in the distance pulled their attention. Scouts from the Coalition were arriving, bringing word that the enemy force they had defeated was regrouping farther east. Yet Jax and Kira knew the settlements were safer now. Their combined actions had disrupted supply lines, scattered forces, and demonstrated human ingenuity at its finest. "Do you think they'll try again?" Kira asked quietly. Jax shrugged, eyes scanning the horizon. "Maybe, but humans don't give up easily, and neither do I." Kira studied him, realizing that for all his rough edges, his stubbornness, and his impulsive nature, Jax had something rare, a heart that guided his instincts in the right direction. And for the first time, she allowed herself to think that this heart, so unpredictable, so human, had a place in her life beyond politics. They walked through the settlement together, side by side. Traders and settlers looked at them with a mixture of awe and curiosity. Humans had always admired courage, but when combined with alien presence and advanced technology, The sight of a cowboy and a coalition diplomat walking together sent an unspoken message. Humans could adapt, survive, and even thrive where others might fail. At the council hall, Jax and Kira presented their findings. Kira detailed the enemy's movements, their tactics and weaknesses, while Jax added insights based on instinct and observation. Together, their report was comprehensive, combining logic with experience, a human and alien approach that no one could ignore. The council listened intently. One of the senior coalition members, a tall alien with silver skin and reflective eyes, spoke. Your combined actions have prevented significant loss. The humans' unpredictability is more valuable than we anticipated, Jax smirked. You underestimate humans at your own risk. Kira's voice joined his, calm but firm. And you overestimate your control. Humans adapt. Humans survive. That is their strength. The council nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. The political alliance had shifted subtly. Human courage, initiative, and heart had proven their worth, earning respect beyond expectation. After the council meeting, Jax and Kira returned to their shared dwelling, now a place of both practicality and comfort. The sun dipped low, painting the mesas in fiery red. Jax sat on the porch, arms crossed, boots resting on the railing. You know, he said, breaking the silence, this marriage thing, it might not be so bad after all. Kira looked at him, raising an eyebrow. Really? That is surprising, he grinned. Yeah, you're not what I expected. Neither am I probably, but it works. Kira considered his words carefully. It does. We have survived together, and more than that, we have learned to trust each other. Jax's grin softened, and for the first time he allowed himself to show vulnerability. Trust, that's a dangerous thing out here. Kira stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. Sometimes the most dangerous things are the most worthwhile. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of desert blooms and distant machinery. Silence settled over them, comfortable and unspoken. They had faced enemies, survived ambushes, and learned to depend on one another. And now, the marriage that began as a contract of convenience had transformed into a partnership of respect, trust, and shared courage. Suddenly, a communication drone buzzed nearby, projecting a holographic message. The voice of the senior coalition member echoed clearly. Your actions have not gone unnoticed. The frontier is safer because of your cooperation. Continue to protect it, and humans may gain further privileges within the coalition. Jax laughed softly. Privileges, I'll take that. Anything to keep the frontier safe. Kira smiled. And we will together. As night fell, the stars above sparkled brilliantly, endless and unforgiving. Yet Jax and Kira felt a rare sense of peace. The frontier was still dangerous, the galaxy unpredictable, and threats still lingered. But they had survived. They had adapted. And they had discovered something far more valuable than alliances or contracts: human courage, heart, and the bonds it could create. They sat in silence for a while, watching the settlement below. Fires burned, traders moved cautiously, and life continued, fragile but resilient. Jax glanced at Kira. You know, I didn't think I'd like being stuck in a marriage of convenience. Kira's lips curved in a soft smile. And yet, it has shown you something about yourself and about humans. Jax chuckled. Yeah, something like that. And I think my heart's got a mind of its own. She laughed softly, the sound carrying across the mesa. Perhaps it does, and maybe that is a good thing. The night deepened, the wind carrying whispers of the desert, the hum of distant engines, and the promise of new challenges. Jax and Kira sat side by side, two beings from different worlds, bound by circumstance but connected by trust, courage, and something neither had anticipated. In the quiet, Kira reached out and placed a hand on his. It was a small gesture, yet it spoke volumes. Jax looked at her, eyes meeting hers, and for the first time he allowed himself to acknowledge the truth he had been avoiding. This marriage, meant only for show, had become something real. You know, he said softly, Maybe this was never just for show. Kira's eyes softened. Perhaps it never was. The twin suns would rise again tomorrow, and with them, new dangers, new challenges, and new adventures. But for now, Jax Teller and Kira had found something more enduring than survival or politics. They had found trust, respect, and the beginnings of a bond that might one day be called love. And somewhere in the vast, unforgiving galaxy, the frontier waited. Endless, unpredictable, and dangerous. Yet with courage, heart, and the bond forged in fire and trust, humans, messy, stubborn, unstoppable humans, had proven themselves worthy of facing it. The stars sparkled above, witnesses to the triumph of heart over fear, of courage over chaos. And as Jax and Kira sat together, the galaxy seemed just a little brighter, just a little more hopeful because of them. For the cowboy and the diplomat, the marriage of convenience had ended, but something far greater had begun. Side by side, they faced the future, hearts aligned, ready to take on whatever the frontier would throw at them next. And for the first time in a long time, Jax Teller felt something he hadn't expected on this harsh, beautiful planet: hope.